Chapter 20 is on population, urbanization, and the environment. The first section of Chapter 20 pertains to a definition of demography and population, demographic measurements and theories, and population trends and patterns. You might recognize the word demography or demographic, if you've ever known anyone in a marketing field or if you've ever participated in a consumer research survey. You might hear the term, oh, we want to know what your demographic group is, or we want to know your demographic. That usually pertains to things like age, race, gender, could be ethnicity, other factors similar to that. Because when marketers sell things, they know that knowing what demographic you're from predicts to some degree what you would like to buy. So just the way marketers use your demographics, and those demographics involve things like age, gender, ethnicity, race. Population theorists, sociologists also look at these factors when they consider demography. The second part of Chapter 20 is on urbanization. And we'll look at urbanization as a process in the United States and the functions of suburbs, exurbs, and concentric zones. We'll also talk about the three sociological perspectives on urbanization: conflict theory, functionalism, and symbolic interactionism. Third, we'll discuss the environment in society, which is a hot topic now because it's so important. We'll talk about a term called carrying capacity, challenges to environment and society, climate change, environmental racism as it exists in the real world. To give you a short introduction to population, urbanization, and the environment, I'd like to talk about a few things from recent history. One is an actual dumpster fire. You hear the term dumpster fire as a joke or as a figure of speech. This was an actual dumpster fire with all of the ensuing problems. And if you read about this case that occurred in Centralia, Pennsylvania, you'll understand why they use the term dumpster fire when things go horribly awry. So this pertained to an underground coal mine. The parts of Pennsylvania is kind of mountainous. There's the Appalachians that go through there. And around that region of southern, central, western Pennsylvania, there was a lot of mining historically. Not so much now because we've found other cheaper, cleaner methods of getting energy, but there probably still to this day some. But a lot of people had jobs in the coal mines in this area of southern Pennsylvania, parts of Kentucky and Ohio, in that area. So there was a coal mine underneath the ground, and there was I believe it was a gap in the ground, and someone dumped some trash. It was a legitimate place to dump trash. It was a landfill or something like this, and there was a fire where the trash was, and it went through the fracture in the ground into the underlying mine area. And because there was coal there, which we burn, it started burning. This was in the 1960s, and believe it or not, it's still burning today. Environmentalists, scientists, probably, I imagine, geophysicists, they have looked at these, or maybe not geophysicists, but real experts in this area who study things like this all the time have not been able to find a solution to put the fire out. And they've had to evacuate the community. I believe you can count the number of households still existing on one hand in this area of Centralia. And they've vacated the area because it's not safe to live there, and against the government's offer to buy them out and help them to move to a different area, these families haven't wanted to move, so they've stayed there, very few. And basically it's a ghost town. They have a road that runs through it called the Graffiti Road, because since it's never used, people have done huge murals and works of art on it. So this is a problem created by our trash and created by our energy production. We need energy. Anytime you produce energy, there's going to be some associated risk. And over the years, accidents happen. So this is one of those accidents. We don't use coal as much now. However, we have problems with other types of energy we use. We've had nuclear problems with nuclear energy, nuclear spills and disasters. So it's just a problem that exists. Something related is the movie Erin Brockovich. If you've seen this movie, it was out in 2000, starring Julia Roberts. And she discovered a cancer cluster, and I believe it's based on a true story. And it was there was corporate dumping. Some factory was dumping material that was carcinogenic, cancer causing, in I don't know if it was a river or some type of moving body of water in the area. And these cancer clusters, when you find a particular finite area that seems to have a much higher, or at least a significantly higher rate of cancer than the surrounding areas, sometimes it can be something called a cancer cluster, and these are often caused by environmental toxins. Either toxins that were dumped there illegally recently in the last 30 years or so, or maybe toxins that have been there since, for 100 years, from the Industrial Revolution, before we knew the ill effects of these things. One thing they tell you to do if you're going to if you're going to grow any type of vegetables or produce in your yard, they say to test your land for lead in case, who knows what was on your property 100 years ago and what contaminants could have been in the soil. So this is another problem that exists. So in Erin Brockovich, I believe that there was a lawsuit, and it involved this company that was illegally dumping contaminated materials into the water, and that's what caused all of these deaths from cancer in this one small area. And then my last point is, this isn't in your text, but it's something I've read about recently, and I want to ask the question, well, are there Alzheimer's or dementia clusters the way there are cancer clusters? Because there's a little bit of data on this. They show some cities have more and some countries have more, a higher rate of Alzheimer's or dementia. Alzheimer's is a subtype of dementia. And things that can contribute to dementia are things like inhalation of toxic things. It could be, a lot of times it's mold. It could be other toxic things. But these various contaminants are neurotoxins, and that's why they tend to cause more occurrences of dementia and in a younger population. So big cities might have more of this. And there's a city, I believe, called Hilo it's on the Big Island in Hawaii. And I believe they have a rise in dementia because of all the volcanic soot that is in that area, because the island has a huge volcano on it. So it could be something natural, not necessarily something caused by humans. In Finland, the rate of, I believe it's Alzheimer's, it may just mean overall dementia, but I believe it's Alzheimer's, it's very high, because they believe it's because their cold, damp climate means that a lot of their older dwellings are contaminated with mold, and sometimes it can be difficult to know that it's contaminated with mold and then to remediate the mold and get rid of it and make it healthy again. So that's something that is naturally occurring as well. So demography is the study of populations. Scientists analyze populations using 4 main theories: Malthusian theory, zero population growth theory, cornucopian theory, and demographic transition. The human population is growing rapidly, especially in peripheral nations, which is another name for the poorer nations that aren't completely industrialized or post-industrialized. Birth rates, mortality rates, and migration all impact population. Various outcomes could arise from human population growth, and even experts disagree on which aspects of this will turn out to be positive or negative. We know that if our population really continues to soar, we will tip the scale of the carrying capacity of the earth, and there will be problems associated with that, probably limited potable water, contaminated air, things like that. But there's a lot of things that happen before we're in really serious trouble with this. But we need to address it now, because if we don't, we will eventually be at that point. Earth is currently taxed regarding its resources and will almost definitely become more so as the population soars. So it's a matter of addressing this before we get to that tipping point. And some people think it's closer than others. Some experts think we really need to start acting now. So I've put some terms on the next page that I've just mentioned factor into population: fertility, fecundity, mortality, and migration. You need to know what these are. So the fertility rate is a measure noting the actual number of children born in a population. So but for a given woman, and you'll see rates for countries like 5.4%, 2%, but to put that in your general scheme of what you interact with every day, that's about 2 kids per person, per woman, of course, oftentimes it's a family, but it's about 2 in the US. And this varies according to your locale culture. In sub-Saharan Africa, women are more likely to have 4 to 5 children. And there are reasons for this. In sub-Saharan Africa, they're not worried about, usually, sending their children to a 4-year college and needing to pay for that. Because that's one of the things we think of in the U.S. How are we going to educate our kids? How many kids can we afford to send to college? This is a real world problem that we deal with, that I currently deal with. And also, in some rural areas, pre-industrial nations, agricultural societies, they need kids to work the farm. By the age of 5, most children in these countries will do things like feed the chickens, collect eggs from the chickens, and they will graduate. As they get to be 7 years old, they can take care of small farm animals. When they get to be 9 or 10, they start helping with the younger children. You'll see 10-year-olds hoeing the ground and holding a baby, So, and that helps their society. So we say to them, you're overpopulating the earth, but they say to us, look, you have a much higher standard of living than us, and we need to work our lands. We need a large population. So you can argue it from both sides. Fecundity rate is different than fertility rate. Fecundity rate is more like the possible number of children you could have if you had children all the time that you were able to. So if you took a woman's childbearing years and said, well, how many children could the average woman have during this time from maybe, 15 years old to 35 years old or something, you'd probably get a figure somewhere in the range of 10 to 20, depending on the culture, depending on the society and their level of advancement and their level of other things, health variables. If you think about a TV show that was on a few years ago, I believe it was called like 21 and Counting or something. It was about this family, the Duggars, and they had decided that however many children they could have, they would have. So they did not try to decrease the chances of conception. They, of course, were anti-abortion. I believe they were a Christian family, and they decided that they wanted to accept any children that, came their way biologically. So this woman, I believe she had at least 21 children. It might have been 22. And that was a show that was on years ago. That went down in a dumpster fire, to use a term we just used, because there were problems that occurred. But at any rate, that show is no longer on the air. And that woman was, she was probably extremely healthy. She had probably started having children maybe when she was only 19 or so. And she had children a little bit later into life than a lot of women have. So she was lucky. Biologically, she must be very healthy. And I'm sure she also does healthy behaviors, like she she's active with 20 kids, and she probably doesn't drink or anything like that. So she was able to have children when she was a little bit older, whereas a lot of women have problems conceiving over the age of 35. So they wouldn't be able to achieve 21 children. But maybe 15 or something like that. That's the fecundity rate, the possible number of children a woman could bear. And they measure this for populations too, because these factors tell us different things, and considered all together, they can point us in different directions. It's valuable data.